Everybody has a different definition what trance is. To me, it's about electronic music. It is relatively easy, especially with the modern day technology, to make one big track. If you pair this up with proper PR and the right TikTok moment, you can leave a little mark. In terms of having a longer lasting impact, I think you need to have a certain approach to the music. When I was in hospital, the professor was like, asked me, so it's like, where do you think this is like going? And I said, well, I would like to be back on stage at one point.
Hello, Paul van Dyk.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us in your very busy schedule. I heard before this interview that you were once Germany's most frequent flyer.
I was, I think, number 2, I was told. I was once. But yeah, I'm not flying Lufthansa that much anymore. Okay. So I guess I kind of got scaled down a lot. Okay.
What truth did music teach you?
Well, I grew up in East Germany, so it's like the only way for me to connect to the outside world was listening to West Berlin radio stations. So to me, music is much more than just an audio file. To me, music is the connection to the free world, it's a connection to everyone else. And so, in a way, it's an audible manifestation of humanity.
That was a really great answer, and I actually wanted to return to that later. You have established a legacy for yourself that you know of as the godfather of trance music. You have paved the way for a genre that has a huge legacy. However, your manager told me that you actually don't like being associated with the word trance or with the genre trance, and you consider yourself rather an advanced electronic artist. Can you tell me more about that and what the difference is?
Well, I think it's like, I prefer a more open description because everybody has a different definition what trance is, as much as what techno is or what minimal techno is or melodic house. It's like everybody has its own idea about these sounds, and to me it's about electronic music. And I always try to kind of break the boundaries within my own comfort zone of music. And so one journalist once came up and was like, so you're an advanced electronic musician. And so that's where that terminology came from in a way, because it really describes it. It doesn't narrow what I do. It doesn't pigeonhole me into just something. And it gives me the freedom as an artist to do what I would like to do, and that's making music. You've played, at least from an outsider's point of view, in a similar style for almost your entire career. Maybe you would disagree with that. But what's kept you engaged with this particular style for so long? Well, I think... Well, number one, it's like, to some extent you're probably right, because I'm actually an artist and I make my own music, so I don't have a ghost producer and my sound doesn't change by changing the ghost producer. So it has a lot of me, and that sort of connecting element is the energy, is the drive, but also the melodic element, something that captures you on an emotional level. And that combination is, I would say, probably what defines my music in some sort of way. I mean, I've been a music journalist for like a decade, and I do see this trend now of trance, obviously kind of an umbrella term, coming back into style. It feels like an inherently nostalgic genre. Do you feel like it has evolved? Well, trance definitely has evolved. There are like so many phenomenal artists who come up with like great stuff that's like future orientated and moving forward and pushing the boundaries of this genre every day. I also obviously noticed the sort of like the reoccurrence of like certain records from the trancey genre, but it seems to be more like stuff that was like played by some in the 90s rather than something that is up and now. I mean, Universal Nation was a great track in the 90s, but there has been also a hell lot of musical development since then. So why people still pushing the boundaries on that particular track, I'm not sure. But yeah,
if it let's say encourages people to listen to what's actually current in our musical realm, then I'm fine with it.
You mentioned before we started recording the interview that you felt like a lot of contemporary trance artists are playing records that you wouldn't even play in the 90s. Can you just tell me more about that?
Well, it's quite interesting that you see some of, the DJs that label themselves as techno DJs or DJing these days actually play music that was like, let's say considered being trance music at the end of the 90s. But for the core trance fans, we didn't even play that music. We didn't even hear that music. So it's kind of like almost a revival of the B-sides of the 90s. And so it's kind of interesting for me, obviously, as someone who has been with this music and loving this music and seeing the development of the style for so long, that particular style somehow sees a reoccurrence and suddenly is called techno and it's being considered really cool, if it wasn't even considered cool at the time when we were listening to stuff that's trancey.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a step back, briefly talk about your debut track from 93, For an Angel. I'm sure you've talked about it to death, but it is one of trance music's defining anthems. And I'm very fascinated by how this one song has influenced the genre so much, to the point where I still see articles written about it today. So I was just reading comments on the YouTube video for this song, which has like 83 million views. It's like absolutely insane. And some of the comments are really poignant. One person wrote that you're the equivalent of Elvis, Bob Marley, or Madonna, but in a different genre. Someone else wrote, Paul's music is the soundtrack to my life. Another person said, I've seen this guy's sets. They're unbelievable. Thank you, God, for allowing me to witness them. I mean, really, like, people are so passionate about your music and what you do. First of all, I guess, how does it feel to know that?
Well, it makes me very grateful because, when I was a kid and I was behind, what they call the Iron Curtain, and there was like not really a perspective for me in my life. Music was the only gateway for me. And being able for the majority of my life now to actually make music and also to live from the music and live with the music, the only people that enable me to do this are the people that sort of listen to my music, that sort of, kind of pay for my music, come to the shows. And grateful is the only thing that sort of comes to mind with it. And on the other hand is as well, not really that I would need it, but it's also kind of like, always pushing me to be even better next time around.
But what do you think separates an artist or musician that has brief success, which we see so much in the industry, with someone like yourself who has left really an enduring fingerprint on so many people's lives? Well,
it is relatively easy, especially with the modern day technology, to make one big track. If you pair this up with proper PR and the right TikTok moment, then you can leave a little mark. In terms of having a longer lasting impact, I think you need to have a very clear artistical idea as well and a certain approach to the music. It's not that you can manifest this idea in words, it's just something that you feel. It's something that drives you as a person and that shines through in your music. And I believe this is, even though it's a word that's used very often in not the best way, but that's really authentic. And I think this is what people actually connect to, and this is when people follow you maybe longer than just one track.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I want to talk about your most recent album, This World Is Ours. It came out earlier in the year. Tell me about the album title.
Well, This World Is Ours is it's pretty much about me sort of like, on a sort of like thought line of what is AI doing with us as humanity. We have like very early stages of what AI is, and it's already influencing us massively. Now, if you kind of like dig a little deeper, you will find quite a lot of experts that say there's a self-awareness flick when AI thinks it's its own entity. Then we actually really have an issue. It's like, if whatever that, let's call it the thing, knows it exists, then it will identify threats. It will identify opponents. And that will be, first of all, us humans. And right now, I don't see a point where this actually topic is anyhow addressed, where anyhow this is approached properly. And so by thinking through this, there was like a lot of like inspiration to kind of make music in a certain way and approach it in a certain way, even to the point that I kind of like, I made a little bit of an experiment. I typed into an AI generator, write a poem, and it came back with something so amazingly human,
really,
that it scared me.
Wow.
And I got an AI generated narrator to speak the poem, and on the album there's this little thing called the poem.
Wow.
And it's that, and that sort of like shows the actual real danger, because it's so beautifully human, and the way how the guy speaks, you just want to hug the guy, despite the fact there is no guy to be hugged because it's AI generated. So it's like, in a way, it's also to remind ourselves like what differentiates us from algorithms. It's our humanity, it's empathy. That's where the album comes from, and that's where the album title's coming from.
Yeah, really poignant. I think very true. You said in a past interview that you see your music as a way to escape from reality, and a way to receive positive energy. How does that square with seeing music as a pathway for political change? Like, can those two things coexist?
If somebody's charged with positive energy and a smile on their face, they walk through life differently, and that in itself actually will enable more friendly dealing with each other, And so therefore I truly believe there's, it's all interactive. It's like if you go to a club, that's not out of social life, that's not out of society, that's a part of entertainment. And so it's like, we all interact constantly with each other. And that positive emotional and energetic drive that you get from electronic music, from an event, from festivals, this is something that leaves an impact.
Yeah. And my hope is that in the future, or even in the next few years, as AI does become more of a thing, these spaces are going to be they'll become more and more special, because it's like the only place where you're really having like human to human interaction.
Yeah, by the way, it's probably also just a question of time that we have AI generated DJ sets or something like that. But still, the interaction then will still need to come from a human to human. So I believe there's more positive than negative, but we have to be aware of it, and we have to kind of like take out what separates us from a machine.
I've seen you DJ in a shirt that says "Make Peace, Not War." You've been pretty outspoken about conflicts, geopolitical conflicts in the past. I also learned that you were part of the Rock the Vote campaign in the U.S. a long time ago. I'm American, and I was pretty delightfully surprised to see that. I think you and Bono are the only two non-American musicians to ever engage with U.S. politics. In those early years when you were growing up here, electronic music seemed to really represent this. It was like an audible expression of freedom because of its total, freedom from the rules. And
you know, in the last 30 years, it's become such a huge industry, which you're a part of. Do you think it still embodies that energy?
Some of it still embodies that energy, but obviously a lot of what we see and hear is kind of catering to a very short attention span. To me, some of the best pieces of electronic music, they're still 8, 9, 10 minutes long. As an example, on the album, there's a track called Against the Algorithm, because there was no way to make it anyhow shorter than 10 minutes. So it's just like this. The music still exists. It's a bit more difficult to find, because if you just consume your music on Spotify, then you're basically a victim of the algorithm, and you just get the same sounding stuff on and on. It may be, despite the fact that we have much more outlets, maybe it's even more difficult to find that music these days, because all the channels are stuffed with the ever same sounding stuff.
Yeah. I was asking somebody recently what music they listen to, and they just like literally didn't know what to answer, because they said they just listen to Spotify. And I think because I'm a music journalist, my experience of listening to music is different, but I do think that is becoming more and more like the norm.
But I was asked this question also before. It's like, back in the day when there were maybe 100 new releases every week, on vinyl, and you went to the record store. Maybe I bought 10, and maybe 2 or 3 of the records actually made it into the set the next weekend. The problem is now we probably have, 10,000, 100,000 new tracks every week. But it's still only 2 or 3 tracks that make it into next week's set. Mm-hmm. So the quantity just jumped, the quality not necessarily.
You seem like a very passionate person. And without, going into detail, I know you suffered from an accident a few years ago that left you with some serious health issues. And I think at that point, you didn't necessarily need to continue touring. Like, you were already really established and successful. What's compelled you to continue your career at such an intense pace? I mean, you're still really, right now we're doing an interview squeezed in like an hour between other interviews and a flight, which is incredible.
Well, I think it's my passion for music and the importance of music in my life that sort of kept me going. At the end of the day, I remember at one point when I was in hospital, it's like the professor was treating me mainly. He was ask me, so it's where do you think this is going? And I said, well, I would like to be back on stage at one point. And then he asked me, so when do you think this is going to be? And I told him specifically I would like to be at EDC in Vegas. It was a very ambitious target to do that, but it was also something that sort of gave me a lot of drive and a lot of push to kind of never give up, despite all the love that I received and all the energy that sort of kept me going. But from myself, that wish to be able to do again what I love doing was something that really drove me, because in the beginning when I was delivered into hospitals, they told my wife I most likely don't remember who I am or who she is. I effectively had to learn to eat, to speak, pretty much everything. It was pretty much all gone, and the first 5-6 weeks I was in a wheelchair, not knowing if I will ever be able to walk again. So it was very, very drastic. So for me to have that ambitious goal to be on stage again was a very driving component of healing, I guess. When you have a goal towards something, you may be able to unlock some resource of energy somewhere.
That reminds me, I just finished reading this book, and now I'm blanking on the name, about this guy wrote it who was in Auschwitz. But basically the takeaway from the book is that people who have like hope and a vision for themselves in the future are the ones who actually end up enduring longer than anybody else.
Yeah, and a very important part, and luckily enough I had that, is actually love. If you have somebody to fight for, and I had that. It's like, I totally understand. It's like when I was in hospital, it's like, you always get the question, so how much pain do you have on a scale from like 1 to 10? I always said 100. And I understand everyone who just says, look, I gave up, I can't do this anymore. Because I had neurological injuries, so my analytical center was always telling me, you in massive pain, despite the fact there may or may not have been. I mean, I broke my spine too, so yes, I had pain, but my brain was over-exaggerating that information to a scale that was unbearable. And love was really the thing that sort of like drove me to the point of, I can do this. And I think this is like something that's really, really important, and maybe also one of the reasons why I'm so grateful to still be here and to still be able to do whatever I love to do, and even the things I don't like, but at least I'm able to do them.
Yeah, wow, it's a pretty amazing story. I guess on some like closing notes. I mean, what do you want to see more of? Like, I mean that in a broad sense. I mean in music, but also just in the world that we're living in.
I would like to see more understanding for each other, more empathy, not discriminating someone because that person maybe has a different view on certain things in the world, and not discrediting someone because he sort of thinks of certain things in a different way than you. It's about interaction. It's about communicating with each other and finding a common ground. And I think we need much, much more of this. It's like, you just need to pop up your social media and you see 5-6 topics that are so, in a way, insignificant, but still so hyped up, and they create gaps in societies, and I just wonder why. It's like, we have some serious challenges on this planet, and we need to kind of try and solve them. But we can only do this together. It's like, it doesn't make any sense that one corner of the world is trying it and the other ones don't. We need to get everyone involved. We need to get everyone to communicate with each other. And empathy is the key, in a way. Trying to understand, your opponent.
It's your last dance ever. What do you want to hear?
Wow. CB by Luke Howard.
I don't know that.
I don't know. It's like, there has this genre popped up. I don't even know if he's affiliated with it or not. It's called like neoclassic. And he's completely different than that, but probably still closest to describe that. That was, by the way, also my first dance at my wedding.
Oh, that's really sweet. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really great talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.